Hello everybody and welcome to my little introductory tutorial to Toon Boom Harmony Essentials. I originally wanted to do this live actually, but for some reason OBS and my computer now today don't become the best of friends it seems. So I'm gonna record this and then upload it to my YouTube channel. Should be just as useful, and I can even edit out my mistakes, so probably have some advantages there. I wanted to keep this as, kind of hopefully useful but lo-fi as possible, because I just know myself, if I'm trying to have huge production values with this, I'll never do it. Maybe shortly about myself. My name is Joel. I'm an animator from Switzerland. Let me just, draw a little Swiss flag here. There we go. Luckily, it's a very easy flag to draw. I've been using Toon Boom since like Studio 5 or something, I guess. That was like really a long time ago. I've been a Flash user before that, when it was still called Flash, and I will still call it Flash no matter what, so don't judge me. And I have been using other tools like Moho, After Effects. I've dabbled in Clip Studio for animation, and recently I was also trying out Grease Pencil in Blender, which is pretty new. But I keep coming back to Toon Boom because to me it still is just the most useful of all of them. But I keep coming back to Toon Boom because to me personally it's still the most fast and easy way to do any sort of animation, and probably as you can tell, my favorite tool of them all. So I've been in quite a few art communities online, on Discord and other places, and where we share animation and so on and so forth. And I always notice there are around like the same problems that beginners face when they first start out trying the software. I've been trying to convert a few people, but I always see them maybe like get hung up on the same few things, and I think that's a shame because it's a really great package for any animator to use. So I thought I'll make a little tutorial and maybe help you out. I call this the first hour because this is like really the basic stuff that you could that would help you to make your first little project in Toon Boom. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, maybe I just want to talk about like why should you use Toon Boom, because that is something that comes up quite often. So first answer to that is, why shouldn't you use Toon Boom? Because after all, it's an industry standard by now. I think that is pretty much agreed on. It has an amazing vector engine, and I think that's the thing that Toon Boom really understood from the get-go. They knew if we're making an art program for 2D animators, then we do have to have the best drawing tools there are, because that's basically what we do all day, right? We sit down and hunched over our Cintiqs and draw, so better have the best tools available. And the vector engine really to this date is really amazing. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but when you get to Toon Boom Advanced, then you will see all the sort of neat textured vector brushes that you can get, where you really basically can have the look and feel of a pencil, for example, but with the convenience of being able to still edit your lines separately and so on and so forth. So I think that is pretty much undisputed by now. For me, it just seems to have a tool for any problems that I encounter whenever I do animation. I mainly do frame by frame animation with a little bit of light rigging here and there, but I think it's the same with cutout as well. But for any problem or any challenge that you could have in 2D animation, most of them Toon Boom has you covered. And also, I think after you get maybe over the first hurdle, it's really fast to use, and it's really fun to use. And I think animation is already enough of a hassle as it is. So if you have a tool that enables you to work with more speed than you usually would, it's really powerful. So what do the detractors say, or the haters? Why should you not use Toon Boom? So the first thing that gets thrown around is like that it's hard to learn and use. And maybe I'm just biased because I've been using it for so long by now, but I really don't think that's true. I think there are maybe a few concepts that trip people up because Toon Boom, originally Toon Boom was really centered around, bringing an analog workflow with, rough drawings, cleanup drawings, coloring, camera, and so on to the digital world. So a lot of terminology and a lot of the philosophy behind it is still very rooted in these classic, in these classic methods. But overall, I think it's really not that hard to learn, or especially not to use once you have the basics down. I would suggest to really start out with essentials. This is what we're using now. By the way, I should probably add that I'm a premium user, so I have like the highest version of it. So if I get confused in the middle of this presentation, please excuse me. It could be that I'm looking for a feature that Essentials doesn't have, but you will get pretty happy with Essentials for quite a while, I think, if you're just starting out. So don't worry about it. And then you can gradually get to advanced, and then eventually to premium, and slowly build up your skills that way. It's not as versatile as Artwise because it's a vector engine, and you get all these clean lines, but there's really, if you want to do something more impressionistic with nice pencil or charcoal or something like that, then you need a bitmap program, right? Again, if you look at the brushes that are even come included with the advanced version, you will see that you can basically get very close to a bitmap traditional look with vector brushes, so which is again pretty crazy. Plus, if there's anything that the vector brushes couldn't do, of which I can't really think of anything, but if there is, Toon Boom also offers bitmap layers, so you can use that. Studios use Flash. No, that's not true. I think by now we just have to get over that. I mean, obviously, of course, some studios still use Flash, and I guess a lot of the, especially boutique and smaller studios, but, Toon Boom I really saw Toon Boom raise from the underdog to the industry leader, and that's where it's at. So if you ever want to get a job in animation, in 2D animation, or that's your goal, then it's definitely a good idea to maybe at least learn some basics about the software. And the price, yeah, that is definitely something that I can appreciate, because some people just don't, when they're students or just are from maybe countries where there's a bigger wage gap, just simply cannot afford it. But I would also say, first of all, the price with premium, for example, which is like around, I don't know, $120 a month. You have to see that premium is basically the frame by frame stuff. It is a really elaborate rigging tool for cutout, and it also has a whole compositor in it. It's basically more or less 3 packages all jammed into one. So that's why it just has this big price tag. But if you, for example, are not interested in rigging, or you're not interested in compositing much, then it's completely fine to stay with Essentials or Advanced. And if you're a student, you get Essentials pretty cheap. And even if you're not a student, you get Essentials very cheap compared to its competitors. So I'm not getting paid by Toon Boom to say that, but I just know that Toon Boom can speed up a lot of your workflow. And since I want to see more great animation by cool people, I will do what I can to hopefully convince you by the end of this presentation and demonstration. All right, so just very shortly about the differences in versions, because that's a question that comes up pretty often as well. So we can say, in a nutshell, more or less, Essentials offers you all the basic stuff. If you come from Flash, you can think of it as being Flash, except the shape tweening, So you have the motion tweens, you have some bone deformation, you have all the frame by frame stuff, exactly as in Flash, plus the better brush tools and so on and so forth, but you don't get a shape tween. Toon Boom calls that morphing. But since the shape twin never worked properly anyways. I think it doesn't matter that much. With advanced, it's getting more interesting because then you get the textured brushes, you get the pencil tool with pressure sensitivity. So right now in Essentials, you can see it's exactly the same as in Flash. You know, the pencil tool basically just has one thickness, whereas the brush tool, you know, you get these nice varied lines. That can come in very handy if you do stuff for rigging, especially where the pencil tool is used much more. I mean, it's also very useful to frame by frame, but most frame by frame people I see use the brush tool anyways. It depends. Anyways, and the third thing, which I find the most intriguing thing, is all the frame by frame features, which are really great. For more info on that, just check out the Toon Boom documentation. And in Premium, it gets really interesting because then you get the node view, the dreaded node view that everybody is scared of at first, and then after they learned the basics of it, they cannot live without it. You get all the compositing features, much more effects. You can pretty much do anything you want in 2D effects. And you get the advanced deformers. So instead of just the bone tool, you also get like envelopes and stuff like that. And the curve tool, which is really cool. So yeah. But I think it's absolutely okay to start out with Essentials, save your money, and really, you know, sometimes having less features is actually beneficiary in the learning process. And the nice thing is all the knowledge you gain here, you can always take with you if you ever choose to upgrade to any of these other versions. It only gets better from here. So interface, I don't want to linger on that too long because I think an interface is best learned by using it. So, and I think most of you probably come from other software and already know what a layer is or what a brush tool is or whatever. So just very quickly, when you first open up Toon Boom Essentials, it should pretty much look like this. I didn't change anything on the layout. This is the trial version because, as I said, I'm actually a premium user. But on the left side, it's pretty much like in Photoshop or most painting apps. You have all your nice tools. You have a black arrow, a white arrow, a brush, a pencil, an eraser, and so on and so forth. Now, on the right side, I would suggest keeping this little window here, Tool Properties. When you start out, keep that close by, you know, keep it in kind of your peripheral vision. Because something very interesting happens here as soon as I start switching tools. You see you get a lot of nice tool settings. And oftentimes you would be surprised of all the nice things you can find in there and which can help you further. So even now I always try to have the tool properties open as much as I can because I use it pretty frequently. Down here you have the color palette and your colors of the according palette. And then down here you have the timeline. If you come from any other animation software, you're pretty familiar with that. All these little boxes you see here are basically drawings. So my whole presentation is basically nothing else than an animation. If I would press play right now, then we would basically be finished with this whole tutorial and we can, you know, end this. So I wish you a very good evening and have a nice day. No, actually, it's not like that, but obviously the play button plays back your animation that you have down here. This one with the star is basically it renders it first and then shows you a little preview in a pop-up. That's mainly interesting when you use a lot of effects that cannot be shown in the OpenGL view, in the real-time view. This obviously does what it says. It plays the whole thing in a loop. And this one is to turn the sound on if you have sound imported. So if I would have sound in here and I would press play to actually hear it while seeing the animation in playback, I would have to turn on this first. And this one is also very handy because this means scrubbing. And that is, for example, when you do lip sync or something, you can scrub back and forth and you will hear the sound while scrubbing around. This thing is kind of a little thing, like, how do you call these? A jog wheel, you know? I never used this, to be honest. Whoops. And macOS giving me a bit of a hissy fit here. This shows you in which frame you are. This is something I didn't know in a long time. So this is basically for your loop region where your start and your stop should occur. So you could go in here and say, okay, I want to start at frame 10 and I want to stop at frame 40, and then it, you know, would just play back from frame 10 to frame 40. But an easier way is actually to go to the frame that you want to start with, click on start, and go to the frame that you want to stop and click on stop. So it's not very obvious, but you can actually click on this start and stop thing to set your in and out positions of your loop region. All right, and here we have frames per second. That's just at which FPS your animation will be played back. If I would set this to 8, then you would see it goes much slower than if I put this to 24. Note, however, and that's maybe a first little gotcha, it's not like in Flash when I change it here that then my animation, then my scene is changed to this FPS basically. This is really just for the playback. If you want to change the frames per second of your whole scene, then you have to go up here to scene and scene settings, and here you can change it for the actual scene itself. So then it will also export in this FPS. All right. Now, one interesting thing. And I think a first little gold nugget for new users. And it's funny that a lot of them, I see a lot of them don't really finding that out until much later. So let me tell you right now, there is more than your eye sees right now. So Toon Boom in its vanilla form when you first start it up has a lot of hidden goodies, and those goodies are really worth a look. So where are these hidden interface features? First of all, when it comes to these dockable windows here, for example, the tool properties that you, by the way, can also drag and drop around as you see fit. I kind of like to keep it more or less in its default position. On the very right side, not this little X, but this little plus, you have, if you click that, you have a little drop down, and you will see you have a lot of neat features actually that you don't see on the first glance. I could, for example, pull up the guides window here, which now I had open already, but you won't have it open by default. And here I can do cool stuff like perspective grids and so on and so forth. And even more hidden is this one. If you would right click into any area that doesn't have any tool right now, you would see this little pop-up and see there's even more stuff hidden in here. So one thing that yours will probably look like this, but if I right click in here and I'll go down and look for pen settings, you'll see additional tools will be added to wherever you click. If I do it up here, for example, the pen settings will appear in this area. So it's really, it's divided basically into these sections, and wherever I add my tools, it adds it when you select it via this right click menu. So the stabilizer tool, for example, is something I would suggest you to have open pretty early on, because that's really useful. It does what it suggests. If I, with my shaky old hand, try to draw a nose, but I think I really want to have some assistance there. So I can put this on average, for example. And as you can see, it makes you beautiful lines and a perfect schnoz. So another thing that I would suggest having open is the one called Advanced Animation. I'll go over this later, but this is really useful for working with pegs, and the rest I don't really use, I think. So you have these, what are these 6 tools here that come in handy later. So anyways, yeah, check out the right click and just play around with it and see what you can find. All right, let's go over some recommended setting. And to be honest, I think for now I just will recommend you one setting. As you can see, let's say the shortcut 1 and 2. By the way, you can see whatever key I press up here in the right corner. But the shortcut 1 and 2 zooms in our canvas. If I want to, for example, zoom in here on my timeline, it's the same shortcut. but you see this red line around the canvas, which means at the moment, my input is only affecting this active area. Whatever has the red frame around it is the active area. So if I click here, this is red. If I click here, this is red. And now let's click into the timeline, press 1 and 2, and now it zooms in and out of the timeline. Now, personally, I find this pretty annoying. It would be really nice if there was just, an automatic way. As soon as I hover over something with my mouse, it automatically focuses it. Luckily, there is such an option. Go to Harmony Essentials, or I think, yeah, by the way, I'm on a Mac, obviously, so yours is probably under Edit Settings. And on the very first page, you see Focus on Mouse Enter. So click that little check mark there. And now you can see we don't have to click anymore and just have to pay a little bit of attention on which window we currently are before we press our shortcuts, but it's much, much faster than every time first click here and then zoom in or out. So would definitely recommend to put, to be honest, in my mind, this should be on by default, but yeah, whatever. Now you know it. And that's exactly, by the way, the thing about Toon Boom. It has a few things that you just have to know from the get-go. Nobody tells you, but you only have to learn them once and then never again in your life. And you will be glad that you did. Another good trick that I didn't really find out until much later in the game. And now it really makes me crazy when I see people animating like this. So let's say I have, let's turn off my stabilizer. Let's say I have this beautiful drawn face here. And now I want to select this ear. Okay, I go over here with the black arrow. I can select whole drawing parts. I move this up here because obviously it looks much nicer. Copy paste it over here. Scale it here. Now go back to the brush, do this. Okay, let's fill it with a beautiful color. Well, actually, let's close this hole first because I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have worked. Let's fill it with green. Lovely. And then go back to the brush. So, what if I would tell you that I never once have to even switch away from the brush tool? Let's see. So again, face, 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 face. No, how did I do it? Ear here. Okay, zack, 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 zack. Green, duck, 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 duck. You see how fast that went? And that's exactly why I think it's an amazing tool. So now you'll say, well, great. Now I have to Google and research 400 keyboard shortcuts for the rest of my life until I'm at that level. But it's fortunately really easy to find out. If I go to if I hover over my brush tool, for example, it doesn't do it for the brush. Ah, God. But so with this select tool though. So select, you see, select, and then there are brackets, and then there's the keyboard shortcut, and it says here Option S. That's Alt S for you Windows users. So let's see, I'm on the brush, and I press Alt S, and you see it switched over to my select tool. I hear you say, well, that's not really anything amazing because every software can do that. Aha. But now, if I look at the shortcut again, it says Alt S. What if we leave out the Alt and just press S? You can see up here, I'm pressing S and holding it pressed. And now I select it and I move it around and I let it go. And I'm back at the brush tool. So, by the way, the select tool also works with just command or control. Unfortunately, if I just press any of the function keys, you don't see them for some reason. But yeah, also works with control or S, whatever you prefer. And same here, I use the paint on painted tool, which means I just want to paint anything that doesn't have a color already, so it doesn't overpaint my black lines. Let's see, Alt and Y. So that means I can just press down Y, zack, 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 and let it go again. Well, that was a bit useless because I selected it already. But again, if I have the brush tool, fill something with Y and let go, then it goes right back to my brush. So sometimes you will have to switch your tools, But generally, this was really an amazing find for me, because now I could basically most of the time just stay on my brush tool or whatever, and just always temporarily switch to other tools without ever having to go over here, wait until it finally decided to show me that drop down, select whatever, and blah blah blah. And that's what I mean. It's so speedy to work in Toon Boom once you know these things, and that's why I wanted to share them with you very early on, because I think it's something that you will really like. And you can always find out whatever shortcut it is by just hovering and then removing the Alt or Command or whatever it is and just remembering the letter. And then you can do this little trick. So let's do a little demonstration of an amazing drawing. So obviously when you start up Toon Boom, I think you probably already have a drawing layer that looks like this. If you want to create a new layer, then you go onto this little thing here with the red, yellow and blue shapes, and it adds a new drawing. But right now we have one already, so let's just stick with that. Yep. And if you want to have the Mac taskbar, then you just go to the bottom of the screen, but we don't want that actually. I want to go here. So, okay, let's go to the first frame, because that's where probably you want to be. So let's start out with the brush tool, and maybe let's start out with the difference between the brush tool and the pencil tool. If you're from Flash, this is probably nothing new for you, but I will show you anyways. So let's make a line with the brush. And let's make a line with the pencil. Looks more or less completely identical, except that, as I said, in Essentials, you don't get any pressure sensitivity with the pencil. If I take this white arrow tool now, where I can actually edit the individual point though, you see the difference. The brush basically is a shape enclosed by all these vector points, which you can obviously edit after the fact. The pencil line, however, is just one center line that you can edit like this. Obviously the pencil line is much easier to edit, therefore it's a bit more fiddly to get your shapes closed. It's not impossible, but it's just a bit more technical. I personally still like to just use the brush tool. You could also clean up, for example, with the pencil tool and then convert it to a brush tool, but yeah. However, since Toon Boom is amazing, if I go here and hold down on the white arrow tool, there is a little sub-tool called Centerline Editor. And you see it has the brush icon with this thing. And now I can actually treat the brush like a pencil tool. Like a pencil line, rather. Which is pretty amazing. And you have to imagine, where can I... Well, I don't want to keep it too much in abstraction, but where you could use this, for example, is when you're cleaning something up, And, this is a pretty good circle. I'm pretty happy with it. But, up here, it could be a little bit nicer. So let's take this tool, or again, let's see what its shortcut is. It's W. So let's keep it on the brush, press W, and just move these points a little bit to make it an amazing circle. Again, this is super fast and super handy. To the right, you can select your colors, and let's just make a little bad drawing of, like, I don't know, just like some non-descriptive dude. Yeah, amazing. Standing here. So even if you do your rough drawings, it sometimes helps if you see when I press down Command, I can select these individual lines and let go of Command and then, delete them, which is also super useful. And I could also say, okay, you know what? I want to just move around this head. So I just select this head and, move it around, rotate this thing. When you select something and you see this little dot, you can move it around actually to change your pivot point. So now he rotates around the shoulders. Beware though, this has really nothing to do with rigging, just with, helping you to correct your crappy drawings. There is probably another tool that I should show you. I don't have time probably to go through everything, but I just want to show you the most handy things, I think, to start out with. Again, underneath the white arrow tool, there's a lot of handy things actually, and one of them is called envelope. So let's take the envelope and just select the whole thing. The envelope is basically like the warp tool in Photoshop. You see you get these little Bezier handles, and I can move this around as much as I want. And again, it's worth looking into your tool properties, because over here there's this little button here, show advanced controls. If I press it, you see you got an additional 4 points now, these green things, which give you even more additional control. And that is really cool if you are on a deadline and you want to just make, with width and height, by the way, you can have even more points. You can have, as many as you like, although I think 2 is already stretching it because it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. But again, if you're on a deadline or just lazy and you want to have a quick tight in between, for example, or just correct your drawing quickly, then you could use something like this to do a fast correction. Something else that I find really handy, and that should be really standard by now in any software that is about drawing, is this little mirror icon up here. Let's press it, and obviously it does what you would expect it to do. It shows you a mirrored image, and that's the terrible situation where you see that your whole drawing looks like crap as soon as you mirror it. But that's also super handy for all our artists. Another good shortcut I can show you is Command and Option, which is Control and Alt, I guess, on Windows. If you hold these two down, then you get this little old school animation disc. And if I now click and drag, then I can rotate the whole view. To reset the whole thing, press Shift and X. You can also press the little button down here, Reset View. Although the difference is, if I am zoomed in and now I rotate around and press this, it zooms out again. But yeah, if you ever forget the Shift and X thing, just press this and you are back to your standard view. All right. Another good thing is, if let's do a little rough here maybe, or something resembling a rough. Let's say this is a rough drawing of some guy. Okay, let's go down here and create another drawing layer. Again, click on this plus with the 3 shapes. Don't give it any real name for now. Now yours will, as soon as you created it, you see you have a new layer here. Yours will look like this. So now we want to do our clean lines. But as you can see, it's pretty hard to tell, okay, which one are the new lines, which one are the old lines. So this little light bulb down here, if you press this, it will fade any layer that you haven't selected. So if I turn on my if I turn on my presentations again, you see that one is also faded out. But if I go on the annotation layer, it will get full black again. Same with my rough drawing and so on and so forth. So that is really handy for a super quick cleanup workflow. So you don't have to add any transparency filter or anything. And I think that's also good to know. All right. I mean, the eraser tool does pretty much what an eraser tool would do. Coloring I will cover later, actually. So I think that's pretty much everything I can tell you about drawing for right now. Let's go back to our presentation. Some beginner gotchas. I think the biggest gotcha that is kind of hard to explain, but I will attempt it, is really that Toon Boom differentiates between frames or exposures and drawings. In Flash, for example, a keyframe is a keyframe is a keyframe. A keyframe can either be a keyframe that sets a position, or it can be a new drawing, but it's basically all the same. For Toon Boom, it's 2 different things. A drawing is not equally a frame, if that makes sense. So let me explain where that comes from. Let's say we have these 3 animation drawings. Let's say we are back in the 60s and we have these 3 animation drawings on paper. We give it to the cameraman and he shoots drawing number 1, he shoots drawing number 2, and he shoots drawing number 3. So since this is a cycle, we basically just want this face to go smile, frown, smile, frown, smile, frown. So we want to have it go back and forth. So would we just add another drawing with the same expression again and give it to him, just just so he doesn't have to go back on his little staple of papers? No, obviously not. It would be the same drawing as drawing number 2, which will be shot again. So you see, these are the same drawings basically. And he would just have an exposure sheet basically that says 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2. So he knows he basically has to shoot them forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. If we would then, so drawing number 2 is the same drawing, it's not an individual thing. Like in Flash, if I would do it there, then I would take these drawings, copy, paste, but they would be all their own individual thing. Which also means if I would add glasses to drawing number 2, they would obviously also show up on frame number 4, because frame number 4 and frame number 2 are the same drawings. So I hope I can make this a bit clearer in a demonstration, but I think that's just one of the gotchas that sometimes happen. So let's make a really, really quick and dirty animation here. I have no idea what I'm going to do, to be honest. I probably should have prepared that part a little bit better, but I just do something quick. Maybe some guy. So, what was I doing here? I will demonstrate you with a new layer. Toon Boom starts out with every new layer without any frames on them, pretty much. It's different than in Flash in that you don't have to lock the layers all the time if you want to select something. It's automatically only affecting your black arrow tool, or any of your select tools automatically only affect the drawing that you're on. You can change that over here again if you see this little button here, apply to visible drawing layers. So then again it acts like in Flash, but we're using Toon Boom, so why would you want to act it like this? If I start to draw anywhere where it's empty, basically, you see, I make this a bit bigger for you. You see these little boxes. There's nothing here, which means I don't have any drawings. Then it automatically creates a drawing for me. And then I can just move 1 frame forward. Same as in Flash. The period key goes a frame forward, the comma key goes a frame backward. So I can just easily press, period to go backwards. And we can give him a little antic here as well. And flip back and forth. Not a frame forward. Again, we don't have to worry about anything. All right, you get the point, right? First thing you probably are wondering, okay, where is my onion skin? Where is the onion skin? I just find it a good practice sometimes to animate without any onion skin on. It is over here. This little eye with all the red things. If I turn it on, you will see it's like in Flash as well. These little things appear, and you can drag it either on the green or on the red handle to the left or right. And that's how you get your onion skin. And you can turn it off again here. You can also use these things up here that appeared, add previous drawing, so it goes 1 frame further, or it goes 1 frame more, 1 frame back or 1 frame further, but I find it easier to just drag these things around. So let's turn this off again. Now, what I really want to demonstrate to you is, let's say, let's say for whatever reason we want him to turn around again to this position. So we could just say, oh, easy, right? We want to just copy this and paste it here. And also, but we want him on the last frame, since he's not completely moved back, we want to show his eye a little bit. And he also suddenly grew a nose. Oh, fantastic. You know, tack, okay, he turns back like this. But oops, what happened here, right? Now the same thing appeared on the first drawing. So this, I think, is the first little headache that beginners sometimes get. Again, it is, as I said earlier, since I copied and pasted it, it is the same drawing, really. You know, it is the same drawing in the stack of your drawings. And you can actually see that stack of drawings. If I go on here, and I open the window Drawing Substitutions, now it really shows me all the drawings that are there on this layer. Even if I delete one, it will still be here. It's just not exposed, right? So I could also say, okay, you know, I want to show this drawing again, or want to go back to this one, or whatever, right? And you see here, when I flip through it, how it actually chooses these different drawings. So what to do about it? First of all, let's correct this frame again, this drawing, I'm sorry. Let's delete this eye and this nose again, and go to the last one again. So two ways you could do that. You could either just say down here, create empty drawing, and let's see what happens. It created an actual empty drawing. Go to the first frame, and then select the drawing itself, basically the strokes, copy and paste over here. And now when I change something, you'll see it updates in a minute. Sometimes takes a moment to update this. Yeah, now there it is. So now it's actually two individual drawings. But this is pretty tedious, and there's a much easier way. We can still actually just copy this drawing and paste it on our timeline. So now let's see over here, there's this little button, duplicate drawing, creates a duplicate drawing at the current frame. So let's press this, and you see it created an actual new drawing on our stack that looks exactly as the first one, but now it is its individual thing. So I can do whatever, maybe he got a little Superman cape all of a sudden and a party hat. Amazing, and it's not on our first drawing. So this is just something to keep in mind. You know, if you want copy and paste drawing and you want them to be individual from each other, just keep in mind that you have to duplicate them first, so they're really their own entity and not just a copy that references the original drawing in the stack. Now, okay, I think I'm pretty... let's go back to our first animation, because that was a bit more amazing, obviously. So, let's see. I actually think I'm ready to time this out. So, how do I make a drawing longer? Well, pretty easy. You just press on your numpad the plus key. And you see, when I'm on a drawing, the more I press the plus key, the longer this drawing gets, or the longer it is exposed. So let's set it to 24 frames, which is 1 second. And let's press play. Whoop. And obviously it just zips through it, but this first drawing is held for 1 second, because we are at 24 frames per second. Now, this is another thing. I don't know if Flash, but I'm dissing Flash a bit a lot in this video, but it's just the main reference point that I hear where people are coming from. But again, let's say we are still working on this and we want to flip through the whole thing, but you know, let's just add some frames here, add some frames here, add some frames here, and then add some frames here until 50. Okay, and now we want to maybe make an in-between here, I think would be in order. Okay, and you see, since we are on 2s, I have to basically press this plus and comma, period and comma key like crazy to flip back and forth. Luckily, when you press F and G, as you can see, it flips through the drawings. So it doesn't matter how long a drawing is exposed or how long it is held in the timeline, it just always flips to the next drawing. So F and G is really, to be honest, what I barely use period and comma anymore, because I always use F and G, at least when I'm doing frame by frame. So let's see. So I guess we could turn on our onion skin. This is, by the way, one of the advantages of Toon Boom Advanced. There I don't have to set this region manually at all, because I can just say, okay, show me one drawing ahead and one drawing before, and that's all, you know, instead of always dragging this stuff around. But we are in Essentials, so let's deal with it. So maybe he is something like this. Okay, let's turn this off, and then, yeah, it is pretty much Disney quality, I'd say. Okay, amazing. And this is basically how you do it, you know. Now I could also say, okay, you know, this thing is a bit, this thing could be held longer, and we need an in-between here. So how do we do it? You just go roughly where you want your in-between, and you press this button again, create empty drawing, and you get an empty drawing. And again, you can, you know, set your region, and let's maybe, I don't know, do a smear. And with F and G, I can super easily flip through the whole thing. And by the way, instead of plus, you can also press minus on your numpad, and you can make drawings shorter. But there's an even cooler thing that I use quite frequent. Let's go to this thing for a second again. Let's say I have my keys and I just want to have a rough estimate of how long this shot will be. You know, I don't want to have them on ones, basically, because I want to already have a little bit of a playback and kind of get a feel of the thing. So I could just select, holding down Shift, select all these drawings, right click, exposure, set exposure to 1, 2, or 3. So let's put them to 3. And you see it takes all the drawings and sets them to 3 and holds them for 3 exposures or 3 frames. And you can actually, if I go back here again, exposure, set exposure, I can put in anything I want. So that's also pretty handy to know. And it also goes the other way. Of course, I could also select all these drawings and ruin my perfectly timed thing and set the exposure back to 1. And now everything is 1 frames again, but let's keep it at that. Is there anything else amazingly cool that you need to know right now? I think, to be honest, this should pretty much get you started. So just remember, duplicate drawings and new drawing. That's basically what you need. This one here could also be handy. For example, let's say let's set this to 2s maybe. So exposures, set exposure to 2. And let's say, okay, that can happen to you in a longer sequence. I deleted some frames in between or made them shorter, or for whatever reason there's just a gap. So I could just select all this stuff. And here this button says fill empty cells. So it just fills your cells up automatically, so everything is fine again. It's just sometimes a bit more convenient. You could also just go here and press F5, and then it just takes the drawings left to the cursor and you know, extends it. That's like in Flash, right? So I can always extend it to wherever I want by going to the timeline and press F5. Right. All right, I think that is pretty much all I can tell you about animation for now. I hope this is informative. So let's go to the next thing, which is, yeah, we talked about that. Colors. So that's another thing that people sometimes get confused, but I don't really know why, because it's really it's really, really not difficult, and it's actually much. Once you work like this, you wished every drawing program would work like this because it's just so flexible. So let's take our amazing animation here, which deserves to get some colors. Which brings us to the color palettes. But first, I need to have a sip of water. I'm not used to talk so much, or maybe I am. So. First of all, before we do anything, let's make sure all our lines are more or less closed, because otherwise my amazing demonstration won't work. And I'll make even more of a fool of myself. So, more or less, right? On one, I leave the lines deliberately open because I want to show you something. Maybe this gap here we leave open, because there's another cool way to close gaps. This looks pretty good. Okay, all right. You know the drill, right? When you want to flood fill something, just make sure more or less the lines are closed. All right, so palettes. Let's say you have an amazing scene with hundreds of extras and so on and so forth. It would be advisable for each one of your characters or backgrounds or whatever to have its own palettes. I mean, it's technically you could do it without separate palettes, but it would become pretty overwhelming pretty fast. So, and since organization and planning is everything in animation, just make the damn palettes, So to make a new palette, so if you open it at first, this is basically your your default palettes that you get with a few ugly colors, and I don't even know what vectorized line is. It's just not a black and white. Just use these colors for your rough animation or whatever you want. You can also change them to something nicer if you please. Let's make a new palette by clicking on plus here, and let's call this palette Amazing Character. So, and you see we get down here a brand new set of colors. For now, it's actually only one. It's black. So if I double click on here, I could just say skin, for example. And it turns into a skin color. No, it's not that advanced, but if I now go to here, and let's just select the standard paint tool for now, paint bucket tool, as you know it from any other software. And let's just fill this. So, up here in the tool settings, maybe put everything to close large gap, so it automatically closes your gaps. Ah yeah, there we go. Okay, now you say, well, stupid, why would you fill this guy black? We don't see anything. Well, now here comes the cool part, and this is why the palettes are built that way in Toon Boom. Double click on the color. I would set it to H, so you get your usual value. Well, what is that? Hue picker, but you can use any of these. But I always put this H on, and choose whatever color you like. And whoa, whee! Now, why is this amazing? It is amazing because let's say you have a production for a client and you're halfway through of animation, and then the client suddenly says, you know what, we actually changed our corporate identity. Everything's green now. In a lot of other software, you would have to go through each scene again and recolor the whole damn thing, But with Toon Boom, since you can also link these palettes among different files, so let's say I make a second scene with this character, and I want to color him there, I can just basically import this palette by saying palettes import, or rather, I think you can't do, okay, to be fair, I think you can't do it it seems you can't do that in Essentials. But advanced upwards, you can probably do it. You can link the palette, so it always refers to the original that you have saved somewhere. So whenever I would now change the coloring here, it would update in this scene, but since I have linked it to all the other scenes, it would also update in all the other scenes. So I would just have to re-export and the whole thing would be, you know, done at a fraction of the time. And even if you just work on a much smaller scale, it's just super convenient because sometimes you animate something and suddenly you just hate everything. And it's just super convenient to just be able to say, okay, let's try this thing out. The only thing you have to remember is, okay, let's go a few frames forward. Next frame, paint tool, fill. Takes a moment. So, what did I forgot what I wanted to say. Oh yeah, next, of course, for the eye, we want the second color. So the only thing you have to do anytime you want to have, I think a lot of people try this basically. They have this color and then they're like, oh, okay, now I want to color the eye. And then they start to fool around in here and think, why doesn't it work? Well, what you do have to do is add a color here. And now you see new 0. So let's call this eyes. Always a good idea to name this stuff. And then set it to a sort of white. Go in here and there we go. That's all you have to do. You just have to set your colors up in here and then you can use it for the whole shebang. Now, but there's even more. So, as you can see with my amazing cleanup, it's pretty hard to actually paint this stuff because as you are used to any other tool, you have to go in here and really, you know, basically make some target practice to really, to get all that stuff closed. And if I just would do this, then it also paints my my lines, which I don't want. So what I usually use is, again, look at the tool properties, paint, paint unpainted. Now, here's where it gets cool. Suddenly I can just lazily do this, do this, do this, do this, and it's painted. And now I want to paint the eyes, I can basically do this. Tuck, done. And why does it do that? Because it says paint unpainted, right? So it paints everything that doesn't already have a color. And that includes, of course, your line art color because it's a color as well, right? So that makes it really fast to just, you know, do this, not here. Oh, sometimes you have to let it, yeah, it has it, yeah. Obviously, okay, let me demonstrate this right now, actually. Right now, what you're seeing is actually an illusion because this is not really what your lines look like. So let's press K. Aha, suddenly everything has this weird blue outline. What you see now is actually what the vector lines underneath the beautiful presentation actually look like. So you can see, okay, this thing is not really closed. So, two ways. Either I could go take my brush tool, the usual thing, and close this off, but maybe my character design is really, well, I don't really want him to have closed lines everywhere. Again, there are two ways. I could either make maybe a new, not a new palette, sorry, a new color. And over here you see the alpha, so I could also make it invisible. So let's close this, take the color, and make it invisible. So now this is basically a closed line. But it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit annoying because then you have to remember to really set it on transparent before you export and so on and so forth. So a much nicer way is, again, to go to all the nice tools that are in here. And there are two very handy ones here. One is stroke, one is close gap. So let's use the close gap tool. And let's try making a stroke here. And now you see it basically just added an invisible vector line to it. So again, same spiel. It now recognizes this as a closed off shape, even though you cannot see it. And if you press K again, you can deactivate this view where you see all the blue outlines. Another handy tool that I'm going to use right now is if I just take the black arrow tool. Here is this red arrow tool and it says select by color. Lets you select all the zones in your drawing painted with the same color. Because let's say now I'm saying to myself, okay, really don't like this pink and I want something completely else. So let's just click once on the pink and delete. Because with the red arrow tool, it just selects everything that has this color in your drawing. Let's press K again for a second and go back here. And this time, instead of the close gap tool, we select the stroke tool. Because obviously, since this is pretty close to anime, we want some cool shadows. The difference between the stroke tool and the close gap tool is that the close gap tool basically just looks for the nearest. You see, the close gap tool just tries to close your gaps with this as much of a straight line as possible. So just use that if you really just want to close small gaps. And the stroke tool is basically what it says, you know, just an invisible stroke, which also reacts to the stabilizer, for example. So we can use this to make a really nice color separation. Whenever a vector point is yellow, it means it is not connected. It means it's just free flowing, so it won't recognize this as a closed shape. So you can just use the white arrow to move individual points to close that off, for example. Okay, and now let's go back to Paint Unpainted. Take the skin color. Well, again, I know the shortcut. C is close gap, so I don't have to switch my tools. Again, learn these little shortcuts. All right, now we have our main color. Now let's just press a plus and it duplicates this color. Let's go in here. You get a selection of shades here, but I barely ever use them, so let's just make a sort of a shading color. And do it like that. The eyes, press K, turn it off, and here's your perfectly shaded animation. All right. Now, lastly, one good thing to know is this little tool as well. Let's select the red arrow again, because now I want to delete all my coloring basically. So you don't have to go through each frame individually. There is this tool called apply to all frames, or apply to onion skin range. But let's just look at apply to all frames. So it does what it says basically. Whatever command or action I do right now, it applies it to all frames. So let's select this red, this pink color, and you can already see it as a ghosting image. It selects it on all the frames where I had colored it already. So delete, and it's gone. And the same for the eye color. Zack. All right, just as you can see down here, it shows you that in red, and that is because don't forget to turn that off again, because otherwise you're gonna do stuff and suddenly realize you did it for all your frames. So let's just close that gap for a second and turn stabilizer off. But the cool thing about this, now that you learned this tool, it's also available for your painting tool. So I could take the skin. Doesn't always work perfectly, I will admit, but sometimes for like simple shapes, to really color them fast within a lot of frames that you have, it's really handy. So let's say this would be a bouncing ball going up and down. That would be perfect for that. Then you could just go like this, and probably it has to, whoop, oh, okay, probably has to calculate a little bit. Gives me enough time to get another sip of water. Let's see how we done. Colored pretty almost everything except where it had obvious gaps. This one I actually kept to demonstrate later on it, but yeah. So you see all these tools, and I can only show you like pretty, pretty shallow view on them, but that's what I mean, there's just a little helper for pretty much any situation you will encounter in frame-by-frame animation. Okay, let's very quickly go through pegs. So what is a peg? Pegs is also another old school expression for an old school tool, a peg bar. And this is what the animators use to put their paper on and keep it in place basically, so that when it's shot under a camera, it would not wiggle around. But it was also used, if you look at this amazing illustration, to move a piece of transparent celluloid acetate across a background, for example. So you would actually mount it on you could also just move the background basically from left to right. This is a bit of a stupid example, but basically it also was used. Sometimes you could mount it on on a little track basically, and you could move the whole thing from left to right, for example, and the camera would shoot it. So that's why it's called a peg. And a peg is basically the same thing as a symbol. Again, in Flash, a symbol is a symbol, right? A drawing and everything. But for Toon Boom, a drawing is a drawing, and a peg makes things move across the screen. Tweening, basically, is done with pegs. So let's just make a super fast demonstration. Yeah, whatever. And let's just make a amazing monster buoy. Yep, cool. Give it the same skin color, because we don't have really any new ideas. And eyes and teeth. So, there is my cool character. Oh, and if that happens to you, you see I drew now on frame number 43, but obviously I want to start at number 1. Just take this thing and drag it back, and you extend your drawing backwards. This is important because it has to be exposed, right, over time. Otherwise we cannot, it basically just simply, will disappear. Sorry, Zach. So here we go. All right, so I will say you can animate without a peg. If I press this little tool here, transform, and I will just move this guy over here, you will see something happen down here. It made this little dot. This is a keyframe. Now this is an actual keyframe like in Flash, right? If I now go over here, the only difference is that Toon Boom by default already makes a tween automatically. You don't have to make it after the fact, but you can actually change that if you want in the settings. If I go over here, move it over here, whoop, and the thing moves. However, it's bad practice to animate drawings because it will lead to quite a few complications that I won't go into detail, but it's best practice to just keep your movement, your tweening separate from your drawings. And it's super easy, it's just one step more. You select your drawing, and now there we get to this little thing, add peg. Next to add drawing, there's add peg. So let's add a peg, and let's select a peg. You always know when you're on a peg with the transform tool, because the drawing is purple and the peg is yellow. Note that we really talk about this tool here, because I see a lot of people sometimes they select this black arrow thing and then they're like, oh, it doesn't animate, but the black arrow has nothing to do with tweening or anything. The black arrow has only to do with your drawing and stuff like that. So forget about the black arrow right now. Okay, so let's go up here. You can also collapse this, by the way, with this little arrow. So. Let's see something. I don't know if Essentials has that. No, it doesn't have that. Okay. In a probably advanced, but definitely in premium, you can actually make a setting that the drawing is really never affected by any sort of keyframing, but it's fine. It's fine. Okay, now the same thing basically. Let's make a start position here. And let's make a start position at 24 frames over here and have this guy walk across the screen. By the way, here, camera mask, this little box down here, if you turn that on, then you see what the camera really sees. And the guy zips across the screen. All right. Obviously, right now it doesn't really have a nice ease in and ease out. So the easiest way I find to do that is to select your first keyframe, go to this little drop down here, and just select, for demonstration purposes, this extreme ease in, ease out curve. And you see it starts slowly and goes more quickly. Same as with the drawing. If I press plus, it extends the second keyframe. If I press minus, it deletes it. And if I go anywhere in here and I would move this guy again, it sets another keyframe. So beware of that. If you want to have the flash thing where you really, Toon Boom calls them stop motion keyframes, which means basically it's just keyframes without any sort of interpolation. You have these two buttons here. I go to my first keyframe and I will select this straight line. And you see the connecting line disappeared. And now it really just, jumps from one position to the other. If you want to turn it back on, you can press this and it's back in action. This is basically your function editor if you open that. This is, I think you don't really need this to start out. I use it, to be honest, I use these pegs mainly for camera movements, but still, you can adjust your curve here, your eases. So let's do something like this. And now it should really just, ease in basically. And if I had multiple keyframes, let's add one here. If you want to add a keyframe manually, you can also go down here to this keyframe plus or keyframe minus deletes a keyframe. But as I said, it pretty much also goes automatically. So, all right. So now we see it makes that ease in. Where is it? Here. It makes that we want to ease in basically. Apply next. Then it goes to the next one. Then we want to stay a bit. And then we want to have something like this. Okay, let's see. Ooh. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, play around with it is all I can say. One important thing to know, though, is you see right now the pivot point is in the middle. With the transform tool, you can move it and set it here, for example. However, once I deselect this guy and reselect him, you'll see it's back in the middle. That is because moving the pivot with this tool doesn't move it permanently. It's just really for quick adjustments. If you want to move this pivot point permanently, you need to use this tool, which is called rotate, and it's either to rotate your character, but as it says here, rotates layers can also permanently move a layer's pivot point. So move it down here, and now even if I deselect him, pivot is still here. Yeah, so much for that. All right, I think that's pretty much everything I want to say about pegs. Obviously, you can go much deeper. You can do small rigs, you can do an arm, you can do a whole character with that stuff, but that's because you can basically parent these things to each other. But I think that would be a bit too overwhelming for the beginning. It's pretty easy to do. There are a lot of great tutorials online, so check them out. All right, let's move on, because I think I'm already over the hour. But I just have one more thing to talk about, and that is the camera. And multiplane, which is the cool part about it. Multiplane is basically if you have separate layers of your drawings, let's say a character, you have a midground and you have a background, and you basically spread them up in space, so that when you make a zoom or a track or whatever, it gives you a sort of three-dimensional look. So pretty easy to do. Let's first set up a little scene, I guess. So let's say this is character. No, let's take this little guy. I kind of like him. So, tuck. Okay, amazing. So let's make him a bit smaller and let's move him over here. So this is our character. Behind him, there is his cave, maybe. Oops. Oh, another little pro tip. if you want to make an enclosed shape while drawing a line, hold down Command or Control while you're drawing it, and it closes it for you. So here is his cave, and we will fill it gray. Yeah, like this, so we can actually see it. And then let's make the background. Just okay, maybe some clouds or something. All right. Okay, and turn off our light table so we can actually see it. All right, cool. Okay, we have a neat setup. So first of all, let's extend the exposures. Never forget that, otherwise it will just disappear. So now let's add a camera. Let's go over here and add one. Camera. Okay, cool. So if I select my transform tool over here, I can't seem to be moving it. And that is, again, we remember everything that moves needs a peg. So let's add a peg to the camera. All right. Now we're talking. So now you see it's yellow, which is always a good sign, means we can move something. If I press on this little frame here, I can move it around. And if I press on this little zoom thing here, on this little dot over here, I can zoom in and out. So now let's make this really cool, because right now it's obviously a little bit boring. So over here, press plus and select top. Let's make this a little bit bigger. With these arrows, by the way, you can collapse some toolbars. So let's hide the palettes for now. And what you're looking at right now is basically your whole scene from a top view. So you see this yellow thing is actually your camera moving in 3D space. And here, as you can see, you have your drawing layers. So what we want to do now is spread them out a little bit in 3D space. How to do that? Over here, there is this tool called Maintain Size. Click that, and you see an arrow appeared. Here you can, you know, select your different layers if you want. You can also select them here, it doesn't really matter. So let's take our sky layer first and let's move it back. And as you can see, it doesn't change appearance in our camera view. And that is because while I'm dragging this back, it changes its size proportionally. So it doesn't actually get smaller, which is really cool. I wish After Effects had a feature like that, because there, when you spread things out in 3D space, you have to scale them after the fact. So let's scale, let's move the sky back, and now let's move the caves back a little bit. And now go back to the camera peg, and if I move it around, you see there is a bit of 3D sensation going on, which is pretty cool. Obviously, if you have a more elaborate scene than this, it's even more impressive. But let's just, you know, do the same thing as always. Let's go in a little bit. Key here. By the way, be careful when you move these things back in space, it sets keys. So, you know, make sure you're on frame 1, or you can also deactivate this thing, this little yellow man, you can put it on animate off, then it doesn't set keys automatically, but I would usually keep it on because, yeah, it's just much more convenient. Let's put it here. And now let's zoom back. And over here. And that's the whole thing. Maybe add a little bit of easing. So that's basically the whole trick about 3D cameras in Toon Boom. So play around with that. It's definitely something that's pretty cool. You can get some really cool effects. And yeah, have fun with it. Knock yourself out. Let's go back here. I think we're actually pretty much almost done. Yes, we are. Oh my god, this took a bit longer than an hour, I think. So sorry about that. I just wanted to give you some parting words really quickly. Where to go from here? Oh, the camera actually screwed up my presentation, so let's deactivate it. If you hide a camera peg, basically, then it will ignore any. It will basically ignore your camera, which is also cool if you have an elaborate camera move, but you want to just, you know, have your peace and quiet while animating a character. Anyways, that's the last thing I will teach you today. So, cool stuff to learn. Where to go from here? Obviously, I couldn't show you everything, but I hope I showed you enough, and I hope I didn't bore you, because it was a pretty long video. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think with these few things, you really are, you know, you have a good basis to do your own things. I would recommend maybe look at the bone tool up here, look at the perspective tools, because that's really cool to draw your own backgrounds and export them. You can draw and color them, flat color them in Harmony, export them as a PNG and maybe paint them in Photoshop or whatever you like. The library is pretty cool to look at. You can find that here. Effects, I think Essentials doesn't really have that many effects, but still good thing to learn how they work. And if you want to maybe make the plunge to Advanced, Harmony Advanced, definitely check out the vector brushes. Check out the whole thing about marking drawings, mark them as keyframes, as breakdowns and so on, and then using the advanced onion skin with them and the flipping tools, because then you can basically say, okay, I have 20 drawings, 5 of them are marked as keyframes. I just want to see my keyframes in the onion skin or flip between the keyframes and so on and so forth. Really cool. And even more effects. And you can also jump straight to premium if you want to do whatever. My suggestion would be to learn a tool. It's best to make something, you know. Make something really small. Harmony is pretty cool because it can export animated GIFs, for example, or GIFs or whatever, directly. So a good thing to start off with is maybe a GIF, or just draw something straight ahead, you know, just start with one drawing and end somewhere. A take, I always like to animate takes. A turnaround, some cycle jumps. I didn't even show you how cycles work. Yeah, maybe check out how to do drawing cycles. I think that would be pretty handy too, if you want to know that. As you can see, there's many more things to discover in this tool. Okay. There's obviously much more talented tutors than me, thankfully, on YouTube. So definitely, I put them all in the description. Check out ZeBirdBrain. The official Toon Boom learning portal has great stuff. Oli Putland has really nice stuff about rigging. Frank Summers made one of the best brushes I've ever used in Toon Boom, and it's like $1 on Gumroad, and he also has a YouTube channel. And also just Google yourself, damn it, you know, because there's many more infos. So I think now I babbled enough. My voice is breaking up anyways. Thank you very much for sticking with me in case anybody made it all the way through here. Yeah, since, you know, let me know in the comments if this was at all helpful. Maybe if I ever do something like this in the future, what you would like to see. If I should elaborate on something, or if I just better never do this again. I hope my accent was somewhat, you know, somewhat bearable for you guys. And yeah, but I hope it was helpful for you, and see you around. Can't wait to see your animation. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.